are listening to The Story Points, a podcast where the worlds of product and engineering converge to delve into topics that resonate with us in our daily professional lives.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the second episode of the Story Points podcast today. Before I explain what we are talking about, I want to start off with a story. And the story goes, there was a man, an alcoholic, who happened to have twin sons, and his wife had passed. So he was a single parent raising the two sons in whatever capacity that he could. And over a period of time, he did his thing. The sons sort of grew up. Life took its course, and the old man, who had now become an old man, passed away, and the sons were all on their own. Each of them had a different perspective of life, and as it turns out, one son did extremely well in life, got all the right kind of friends, jobs, prosperity, married, had a settled life, whereas the other son couldn't quite make it. He took to his father's ways of life, eventually became a drunkard or an alcoholic, just like his father. And as life would have it, ill health beat him, and he passed away. So a few years passed by. The son who was alive bumped into an old family relative, and the family relative generally did the pleasantries and asked, "How are you doing now, son?" And the son said, "I'm doing good, I'm doing great." And then the relative pondered and asked, "I wonder sometimes, what is it that you got from your father that your brother could not get?" And it, in a sense of pity and sadness, by remembering the other son having passed away. So the son responded, "I learned from my dad what not to do." So, moral of the story being, it's equally important to know what not to do, and as it is to know what to do in life. And as is with all things in life, there is the good and there is the bad. Similarly, I think in product and the tech space, there are things that you should do. There are also things that you shouldn't do. And today, we are going to be talking about what we should not do. Or, in other words, how not to release a product, how not to do a product. Right? With that said, let me open the conversation to the two of my mates here, Roopak and Niraj. And the first question to you, Roopak. Can you think of a reason, a scenario where or when you would fight to not go live?
Yeah, thanks PK for the question. I would suggest, how about we establish what going live means actually?
That's a great question, Roopak. So let's build a little bit more context to this, right? So in the product world, there are, I think, typically three phases that we refer to, right? So there is the design phase, which typically delves into designing what the user experience should be. And to understand what the user experience should be, you would want to establish what the user journey should be. And then you then take that as inputs to figuring out, okay, this is how the product should look like, this is how the product should feel like, so on and so forth. And that then kind of becomes an input for the development folks, such as the two of you here, to do your thing. And I'll let you both explain all the things that you do. And finally, we go live, or we release the product, or we basically tell our users in some way that, hey, you have a new product that you can go and use. So I think here there is the communication to the user saying that we are ready for you to use it. I think there is also, if you may want to touch upon it, the idea of getting that code into production, keeping it ready for people to use it. So I'm more than happy for you to touch upon either or both, depending on what you feel is most relevant.
Yeah, sounds good. Actually, I'm now that PK has established what going live would mean, I think I can answer your original question, which was my experience on what I would not do, right, uh, before releasing a product, right. So to me, I think the finesse of a product is really important. What I mean by that is I'll give some examples. Imagine that you are building a food delivery app, and you have to, you know, you have to build a consumer facing mobile app. So now, given that there are so many apps in the market, similar apps in the market like Swiggy, Zomato, and they have built a certain level of finesse in their, mobile app. I would not release my mobile app until and unless it has that level of finesse which my competitors already have, right? Now, this is from the uh, UX perspective. From a non-functional perspective, it would be um, I'm expecting around, let's say, 1 million users per day on my app, and I know my backend is not ready to handle that. I would definitely not go ahead and release that.
So the question that I want to pose to you, Roopak, is you mentioned the design and the idea of matching the quality of experience to other competitors out there. Did you also mean or want to talk about feature parity? Because that's another thing that a lot of users will want to compare the new product versus the old product on, right? Do I get all the features that is there in Zomato or a Swiggy, or will it give me only half the capabilities? Which again may be a discussion in itself, because we go into prioritization and good to have and great to have and must have and should have. So we'll probably park that for another episode. But I'll now turn the question over to Niraj. Niraj, what do you think? What are the scenarios where you would fight to not go live?
Hey, hi everyone. Thanks, PK, for the question. So, if you honestly ask me about this question, right, so my honest answer for that will be obviously related to the technology. If the technology is not ready, then definitely I will not take it live. When I say technology not ready, it means in terms of quality, I would say monitoring, alerting. There are a lot of aspects. Uh, Quality is the most essential part, because if it's the quality of the code or even the architecture is really bad, I'm sure that it will not serve to the end user, and they'll not get the good feeling about the app or the web app, whatever it is, right? So it's very important that the quality aspects for the entire product which is getting delivered, it's really important, and it should be at a really high standards. This goes back to all your code level things, like are you writing the right amount of test cases, or are you having good monitoring systems? Because it's also important that when the code has been taken to the production and it's getting used by the end user, and if they're facing any error or issue, is the team getting any sort of a notification that the user is facing this issue? What are you going to do about that? So all these things are very important for any small app or a big app or any application to go live, right? So if these checks are not there, I will definitely not be keen to take this to the end user.
Great. Thanks, Niraj. So question, or what I was reminded of when you mentioned about test cases was a scenario which I think we both were in a few years ago, where we were trying to build a product and we were trying to go live, but we were told, or we were persuaded into not going live, because there is a manual tester, who had to complete 500 cases of regression and all of that they had maintained on an Excel sheet, right? So I think it's important to talk about it in the context of quality. How do you see that kind of play into the whole mix? And I know that we talk a lot about the testing pyramid and so on and so forth. I think it's important to talk about it a little bit more. So can you help me as a non-product, as a non from a non-coder perspective, understand what is this testing pyramid?
It's a very good question and a very common question. It's because generally when we write a code, right, we want to make sure that there is some sort of an automation where this code is getting tested, because the code is something which gets changed in its own timeline, right? Today we have written some code, tomorrow we are adding some more logic to it, third day might be reducing some logic out of it. It depends on the features. And if this code is getting so much of times modified, you definitely want it to be tested. Now, every time you can't have the same thing, right? 500 rows of Excel where you want to manually do the regression. So definitely you don't want to do that. And that's why you have automated tests, and you have this test pyramid that in the base you have the unit testing, which is the most fastest thing any developer can do. And there are various ways of doing it. There's a TDD way where you first write the test case and then you make it write the code. We can go deep dive into it some other episode. But generally, the testing is important because this gives an assurity to the engineering team that, okay, I have written this feature and I know it's going to work. Not because it's working in my local, but because I've also written test cases. I've done manual testing on top of it. And there is a good amount of test cases to test my unit of the codes. So that gives a confidence for entire engineering team that, yeah, we can go live. Now, I'm not saying that, 100% there'll be no bugs. Definitely there'll be bugs. But the fixture for these bugs will be much quicker. So that's a good thing to have whenever you want to go live. But PK, that's something what me and Roopak has mentioned, right? Regarding the user experience as a technology. Now, because you're wearing a product hat, what's your take on not taking something to live? Because generally I've seen product people, oh, go live, go live, go live. So what's your take on this then?
Okay. You're right. We are usually always pressing to go live. But I think there are two things which really come to the top of my mind when we're talking about this, right? One is the ability to understand what success means for the product after we go live, right? Let me try and explain a little bit more into what I mean, right? So let us say we've spent 3 months, we've built an MVP. The product is about probably helping people save their marriages, right? And we have built something, we've invested our time and money with some hypothesis in mind, hopefully. And let us say the hypothesis is that by doing A, B, C, D, E, we will reduce the number of divorces in Bangalore by X%. Now, with that hypothesis, I have a very clear view of after I go live, after people have started using my product, whether the product is doing what it's supposed to do, whether it's created that impact that it's supposed to create, whether users are using it the way they're supposed to use it, so on and so forth. So if you don't have a view of these, as a product person, I'd be really uncomfortable going live with the product.
So basically you're asking for some metrics after going live where you can visually see all these things.
That's right. So this is what some of us are referring to as the KPI tree today in certain contexts. But essentially, if you are not able to measure, at least...
Sorry to cut you. I have a question. What is a KPI tree?
The KPI tree is a visualization of what a product or a feature or a tech initiative, depending on where you're kind of viewing it from, needs to do to any particular KPI or any particular metric, which will in turn move another metric, which will eventually have an impact on the fundamental business outcomes. By fundamental business outcomes, I'm talking about either your sales improves or your profit improves or your cost reduces, or it could be a risk getting mitigated. It could be user experience getting improved, or in other words, your NPS scores getting impacted. So there needs to be, from what I have experienced, I think leadership of any organization very easily connects to numbers. And they connect even more faster when you talk about numbers that impact the business metrics, right? So it's also a great way for us as product folks to look at, okay, what do we want to look at? What do we want to measure? What do we want to monitor after we go live? And it helps build a story around it because it's all visual. You can connect to it with a lot more people. As a product person, I use the KPI tree to go and talk to my technology director, or to go talk to my engineering head, or to go talk to my developers, or to onboard new folks who come onto the team. So it helps build an overall alignment of what we are trying to do as a product. So for me, that is super duper important. Otherwise, you end up building the product in silos. So going back to my example of the divorce saving app, Roopak will think we are saving divorces. Maybe Niraj, when you're developing the product, you will think, no, we are actually improving the happiness of marriages. And maybe I will think I am actually improving fitness levels of couples. I don't know, God knows what. So you see why it is important for all of us building a product to have a common view of what we're trying to do. So that is a KPI tree. It's a visual representation of the various KPIs that the product can impact directly and the metrics that can get impacted indirectly. Yeah? Yep. Okay. So there is also a lot of cases where you may not have the infrastructure to measure all these KPIs. And which is okay, which is okay, because that's what it is. It is what it is. So in such scenarios, I think my second point, or my second sort of my opinion of what is a non-negotiable comes into play, which is, if I'm going live and I don't have a view of what to build next, to me that's also a very uncomfortable place to be in. Because as a product guy, you're always thinking about a step ahead, if not a couple. So I would want to have a view of the immediate thing that I want to build after I go live. Again, based on certain hypotheses and certain theories. So that's the other thing. Now, my last thing, which is probably also the most important, is the support preparedness after going live. Right? So what I mean by this is, let us say we've delivered a new food ordering app, right? And we've announced to the world that, hey, the new Swiggy of the world is here. But we need to think about, how will the users tell us what problems they're facing? And I'm not talking about feedback. Feedback is, or surveys where you generally ask, okay, how did you like the product, so on and so forth, thumbs up, thumbs down, whatever. But I'm talking about a way where users can actually kind of tell us what is the issue that they're facing. What is the emotions that they're going through. Now, you mentioned about monitoring, which gives us a very number-oriented view of what is happening. But there's also an emotional aspect to users. So we'd also want to capture that. We need to think about, how do we do that? We need to think about, if someone's trying to order their dinner at 11 p.m., how do we handle that situation? Do we just give them a chat bot, or do we actually get them to tell us and we call them back in the next 30 seconds to find out what has happened? I think these are some considerations we need to really think about. What, after we go live, how do we support our users, so on and so forth. So that's my take. Yes, Roopak, you have your hand raised.
Yeah. So PK, that was those were very good points which you said just now, and I'm like completely aligned with what you said. I also want to know from you, so given that you're a product guy, I want to understand, how would user journeys impact a product, right? Would having a clearly defined user journeys for your product help you, build a better product? Or if I have to rephrase for this context, if your user journeys are not defined properly, would you refrain from taking your product live?
That's a great question. I think there are two reactions. One is that user journeys are super important. I think the designers will swear by it. And so do product folks in general. I think user journeys are super important because, again, going back to the example of the food ordering app, right? Now, unless we know that the first thing the user will want to do is log in, and maybe the second thing, the most important thing that they'll do is find something in that big ocean of hotels and menus and all of that. And then they will kind of pick something. And then they may want to customize. And then they want to pay. If we don't know that, how can we design a great experience? How can we figure out when to show that coupon that they want to use? How can we figure out when to show them the picture and the beautiful content to lure them into ordering that biryani that they want, that we want them to order, right? So I think it's super important. If the user journeys are not defined well, as a product person, I wouldn't even want the developers to write code. Forget about releasing the product, right? So I would say, I always tell the teams that I work with, if at any point of time the developers feel uncomfortable doing whatever they're doing, you should raise your hand and say, I'm not comfortable doing this, which will be a cue for me to say, okay, let's stop, take a step back and talk about it.
I guess this also goes back to the same testing concept, right? Because when you mentioned about if the user journey is not defined well, I'll try to become the end user of this app, right? Food delivery app. Like, let's say I open the app, what I've created or designed or user journey, right? And I see that, no, I'm not able to search. That's not the first thing what it asks me. Then that's a immediate feedback. And I guess that's very important. Like, I guess in iterative world, we need to take feedbacks very carefully and we need to understand that.
100%. I think we can conclude this episode, right? So yeah, folks, we started with, discussing about knowing our customers. So you should first know what or whom you're building for, right? So that's one of the takeaways from this episode, at least for me. Then once I know whom am I building for and what I am building, I would, want to have a certain level of finesse in my UX and in my code, right? But now once I have that code, I would want to observe, right? Observe from both a monitoring perspective, from a tech perspective, and both from the product perspective as well, because I would want to track those KPIs. I would want to track those metrics which impact my business, right? And at the very end, once the product is in the hand of the users, I would want my team or, the product side to be able to somehow support them, right? So these are the takeaways from my side. Niraj, you have something to add to this?
I guess I'm pretty much aligned with what you mentioned. And I guess if you don't think about the user, what he's going to get, then releasing something is like not the great idea. So, yeah, what do you think, PK? Do you want to add some ending notes?
Yeah, well, I think we've had great fun talking about what not to do or how not to release a product. So, thank you so much for being a part of this great conversation, and we'll converse again soon. We'll chat soon. So, thank you.
Great. Awesome. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everyone.